Lucy and Carla from West Midlands Police, and Carla and I have been working really closely for the last 8 or 9 months on looking at West Midlands Police's response to safeguarding and recognising vulnerability. So that is across the whole of the West Midlands, but specifically Carla and I have geographical responsibility for the western side of the city, so Walsall, Wolverhampton, Dudley and Sandwell, so the Black Country. And as part of mine and Carla's work, we looked at how we were equipping our frontline officers with, when they go out to particular cases, you know, what was available to them, what was in their toolkit to look at vulnerability and identify some hidden vulnerabilities, identify safeguarding needs, and really be able to provide a really robust and informed voice of the child. So we talk around voice of the child all the time, but actually what does a good voice of the child look like? And so as such we started to work on some principles, and this is why we've started to do this. Obviously we've had some real tragic deaths in our region, and those faces on the screen really remind us as to why we have to get better at recognising vulnerability, recognising the need to safeguard at the earliest intervention, the earliest opportunity. So in order to do that, we looked at what was available, and West Midlands police officers, and I've got some in the room, have access to mobility devices, so like mobile phone devices, and within that device there's lots of places that they can go to get information. So we looked at creating an app that they could go straight to whilst at the scene, to give them some guidance, to give them a toolkit to work through what a really good voice of the child looks like. And it's about a child's lived experience, that true lived experience, which means that we know everything about their thoughts and their fears, their lifestyle, their family unit, their environment, you know, what makes them happy, what makes them sad. But we knew we needed to really expand on this, and we knew we needed to put some sort of framework in place to make sure that every frontline officer has access to this app. So we're going to work through that now and show you, hopefully, the app that police officers can see. So you'll all get an opportunity to look at what's on the mobility device, and please shout out questions as we go through each slide, because it's really important that we hear your thoughts as practitioners as to how this looks. We initially did some scoping and we did some work with frontline officers before this app went live. So when I look at our timeline, so we went live on the 30th of October 2022 with some training across the whole of West Midlands Police. So frontline officers had this training so they could look at these apps. Just go into it. We have lots of apps in the West Midlands Police, but we have a child abuse app, which is right at the bottom. There we go. So we'll work through this, but please, you know, jump in and ask questions. The AWARE principles are really important. So we adopted these principles from Kent Police, who were working on this as a concept, and actually we feel that we really developed this much more and run with this in the West Midlands Police, so much so that this is now becoming a more national approach from policing around safeguarding. So we'll work through what AWARE means, because I keep saying AWARE and I'm conscious that it means something. So I'll let Carla sort of start to go through this.
So this is like the officer's mobility device, and obviously we explain to the officers that what you see, hear and observe and record today will build a better understanding of children at risk of significant harm, or actually families that are in need of support. So we are constantly reminding officers to be professionally curious, understand context and actually build a bigger picture, because a lot of the time frontline officers are the first people in the house and they're the ones that see it first. So we remind them that it's their responsibility to be mindful and be curious and be aware, and you'll see that throughout the app. That's what we talk about.
So what AWARE actually stands for is exactly as you see on the screen. So it's appearance, words, activities and behaviour, relationship dynamics and environment. That's a mnemonic that we've sort of created so that people remember to go through each stage. We're not asking them to pick which stage they want to go through. You go through every single stage and you make sure that you record what you find.
Yeah. And when you go on to each one, which I'll do, you'll see that there's more context behind each one, that officers have to answer those questions. And I think, although, you know, we deal with sexual abuse and physical abuse, obviously this is a neglect workshop, so, or a neglect conference, but actually all of that links into neglect. Every single part of aware links into neglect, so it's really important for them to be picked up on. So if you click into step 1, this is about the child's appearance. So we tell officers that they should be capturing all of aware on their body-worn videos. So you can see it's the same layout on each one. So this one is about the clothing of the child. So it's saying, is the clothing appropriate for the circumstances? Is it clean? Is it in a good state? Is it the right size? Is it weather appropriate? We also say that identifying school and attending school uniform can help with further inquiries. Physical appearance.
It's quite small for people to see. Can you make it bigger on your screen or not? Can people see that, or does anybody want to shift forward a little bit? I mean, you can see that better.
I don't know why that screen up there is quite small. Is that any better? There is, I mean, it doesn't go into each one, but on the table there's the actual, the aware mnemonic on the table, so you can see which each one's about. I can try and make it bigger, but I'll have to. So physical appearance, we are telling the officers to ask their questions about their build. So what's the child appear like? Are they underweight? Are they overweight? You know, this could indicate failing to thrive or other underlying conditions. And actually remember to compare and contrast them to other family members. You know, different children, different builds. You know, we've got to be looking at these things all of the time. Hygiene is a real big one. You know, look at hands and fingernails. Are they clean? Are they unclean? Are they unkempt? Is their hair unwashed? Is it matted? What's their odour? You know, are they smelly? A lot of the times officers will come back and they'll say, "Oh, the house smelt really strongly of urine." You know, we need to be capturing that kind of information. And teeth, the real big one. Have the children got signs of decay, bad breath? Are they missing teeth that aren't age appropriate? All of those things we're asking them to look at and record when they're out dealing with children.
And these aren't necessarily the things that frontline officers would record. I think they would look at an overall picture of what that household looks like and give secondary investigations a more generic sort of overview. We're saying you need to be specific for each child in that address. So it's not about a collective group of siblings, it's each individual child who has a right to their own voice being heard. And that's what we really want to sort of get across to frontline officers, isn't it? It's about that specific, you know, individual child.
Yeah. And I think when we come on to environment at the end, I'll go into a job actually that we're investigating at the moment, which is an horrendous neglect, but it really does link back to, you know, he had awful teeth decay. If officers had just looked in his mouth, they would have seen that, and there would have been some real red flags, as in this child's being neglected. But I will come on to that at the end, because I think it links in more to environment. So the next part is visual signs. So does the child look tired, fatigued, lethargic? Are they content? Consider other factors within the home environment and sleeping arrangements and routine. Marks and injuries was a massive one for us. There's not a lot out there for frontline officers as guidance, as in what's an accidental injury and what's a non-accidental injury. And officers are going out to children with injuries all the time. So we put on here a body map just to give them a bit of guidance. So we've got common sites for accidental injury and then common sites for non-accidental injury. You know, from experience, me and Lucy have both been on child PPU for a very long time. I know that if I go to a child that's got bruising to the ears, that's a massive red flag for me. So we're trying to tell officers that. So, you know, use this as a base really to go, actually that is a red flag and we need to be doing something about it. And then interaction. Sorry, it's because I've made it bigger. You know, how's the child interacting with you? Are they laughing? Are they smiling? Are they over friendly? Are they wary? We talk about over friendly with strangers, may be of concern. You know, it could be a natural response, but actually officers should be thinking, if a child is coming up to me and wanting hugs and love, actually is that because they're not getting it from somewhere else? And again, that should raise a few red flags just to say we need to address it. So our next step is words. So again, you'll see the same layout for officers to follow. We remind officers again to use body-worn video when capturing it.
Can I just point on body-worn video? So if you're not already aware, every frontline officer will have a body-worn video that will click on when they go into an address. So it records everything visually and audibly so that we understand what's going on in that address. In years gone by, I think there's been some concerns and some reservations about recording children and the implications of that. What we're saying is you're not specifically recording a child, you're recording the situation, and you deal with that situation as you see fit. If it becomes a situation that you actually suspect a crime and you're going to have to start interviewing a child, then of course it's not appropriate. But actually to walk into an address and to scan that environment, to see what's happening, to see who's in the address, it's perfectly appropriate to have that video recording running. And we're actively encouraging officers to do that because it, again, provides the voice of the child.
And actually for you guys as professionals, how handy is that for you? You know, depending on where you work, actually if you go to an officer, well, you know, if a child turns up at hospital or, you know, if you go to the officer, oh, can I see that on the body-worn video? That's really going to help you as professionals, isn't it? Because you've captured it then and there. So yeah, so engagement with words, this is how the child's engaging with you, what type of language they're using, are they too familiar? Again, go back to seeking affection or attention. Does their language match their body language? Does language used by older children suggest some gang affiliation, which I think is really important when speaking to older children? Child's perspective, so this is when Lucy said, I think there has been nervousness with officers to speak to children before. They don't want to speak to children. But we are telling officers it's fine. Ask them open questions. It's absolutely fine to do that. I'm expecting now, when things come through to me, that they've said, how do you feel? How are you feeling? What makes you sad and what makes you happy? Because actually building the rapport and understanding the child and the type of questions that allow them to open up is really important.
Can I just ask, you know, when you say that you're capturing the voice of the child there, you know, when we go to initial child protection conference, would that voice of the child be brought by the police staff that attend? Because that's quite a powerful thing. Because when we get to conference, a lot of parents downplay the incident. But if we've got the voice of the child of how scared they felt at that, actually evidences for us.
And how impactful is it to say, I stepped into that address with, it was an unannounced event, and this is the immediate scene that I found, and this is what I can show you from body-worn video. Absolutely. And I think that it's a practice that we really need to encourage. And I would say, if you're going to ICPCs, to say, can we see the body-worn video? Can we understand what that environment felt like for that child?
And you guys can ask those questions now. You'll be aware, and you can quite, you know, confidently say at ICPC, well, what was the voice of the child? What was recorded on Aware? And it'll be there. It'll be on the crime report, so they'll be able to answer those questions.
And that was going to be my parting, my end appeal to everybody in the room, was to say, please professionally challenge your colleagues and say, have you considered the Aware principles, please? Because they have to, you know, we have to do it. And, you know, it's a really fair challenge to say, this is what we've got in place, this is what should be followed, and has it been? So, yeah.
So this is reaction, tone and annotation, so it's not always about what the child says, but often the way that they're saying it. So we're considering what a child isn't saying. You know, this will be useful to ensure the voice of the child is clearly heard. You know, let's consider, are they being evasive in their answers? Are they answering a question with a question? Or is the language that they're using suggesting half-truths or hiding a bigger picture? Body language, again, really important. You know, do they seem rehearsed? Are they guarded? Do you think they're being open and honest? I say it every time, we've delivered this so many times to different officers. I've been on PPU for 16 years, I think, child PPU for a long time, and I've been a detective, and every time I use my gut instinct, and we're saying to officers, use your gut instinct. If something doesn't feel right, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's all right to do that. So then next step is activities and behaviour. This is about a child's reaction. So is their reaction appropriate under the circumstances? We've got a new domestic abuse desk at work that's been set up in the police, and we're delivering this to that staff because this is about, you know, recording domestic abuse but also speaking to the children. You know, we talk about children that are constantly witnessing DV in the home address. It's their norm, and actually if they're not reacting in a certain way, or they go, oh, this is really normal, then again it's that red flag that officers should be identifying and bringing that to other people's or other professionals' attention. Obviously child witnesses who are part of traumatic volatile events, again there you go, the DA session may suggest that incidents escalated if a child calls the police, so we just need to be thinking about those things. And there, you know, consider what the activity says and the impact on the child's welfare, because early interventions can influence the change that we make. So then home setting, we talk about what's the story in the family home. I think this is a real big one, isn't it? We always talk about Daniel Pelker when we talk to the officers about this. So we talk about, you know, family photos. We've got children. I've got pictures of my 2 boys up in the house. What if you go into a house and there's 2 children and there's only pictures of 1 kid? Where's the other one? It's about siblings being treated differently, and it's just, it's what we go back to being professionally curious. It's just being nosy, and it's asking those questions. Well, where's the other child?
And those that know any of the detail around Daniel Pelker and know that the home environment actually was masking a lot of hidden vulnerability for Daniel. And actually, as professionals, we had been into that address, but we hadn't really understood how much he was being treated differently from his sibling. And so it's about just going into an address and saying, I'm really comfortable that all the children in this environment are being cared for and, you know, yeah, and aren't hidden.
So then we go on to age appropriate stimulation of the toys and gadgets age appropriate. We talk about, you know, lack of appropriate toys, books and gadgets may support exclusion. It may also be indicative of a family in need of additional support. And nurture, you know, how's the child interacting in the home setting and with others. You know, a child that appears lost in their own home or out of place must raise some concerns. And then we talk about attention seeking, you know, again with others within the family home in front of others, either fighting for attention or seeking affection or seeking safety. And then child absent, a real big one that we've pointed out to officers, that you pull over a speeding car or a drink driver at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a car seat in the back of the car empty. It's asking those questions, it's saying where's that child, it's doing the safeguarding at the very earliest opportunity, because that's what we should be doing. So then we go on to next step, which is relationship dynamics. So we cover lots of information here. So there's a link there to building a family tree, just so what officers understand what we expect as secondary investigators to have that bigger picture and bigger understanding behind the family tree. And then a social care unborn referral. I think there's been lots of occasions, hasn't there, where people have been pregnant in the home and we haven't picked up on it. We haven't asked the question. We haven't asked people. You know, if we walk into a DV relationship, we're not asking if somebody's pregnant, and if they are, they should be putting a social care unborn referral through. So we cover here the parent to child relationship. What does that look like? You know, I don't need to go into that. I'm sure you guys are all aware of it. But you know, how is the child reacting and responding with the parent? You know, is there any aggression there? Is there ineffective parenting? Are there undefined boundaries? And here, obviously, the actions we're saying consider children's services referral. But then we talk about.
I found this on the web.
Sorry, picking up everything that I'm saying. But yeah, so we talk about consent of parents if there's just some concerns and when they need that consent, but also actually you don't need consent from parents if there's immediate safeguarding concerns. So there's just a lot of information there, I think, for police officers to understand.
This is all, I mean, it feels like a lot of information, doesn't it, as we're whizzing through it. And I'm really conscious that Carla have done this quite a lot, so we do tend to whiz through it. And I'm sorry, tell us to slow down if you want us to. But I think that the key part of this is that this is a wealth of information that is now really accessible to officers. They don't have to go back to the station to talk to a supervisor to say, what do I need to do about this child that I've just left? You know, it's there and then that they can do these types of checks and balances, which is what's really important, which is why we've almost overloaded the app with information, haven't we, as opposed to not, is the case may be. But I am conscious that there's a lot of information.
Yeah. So I think because we do cover relationship dynamics, so parent to child, child to parent, what that looks like, child to child. So we talk about siblings and peer-to-peer relationships and what that looks like. Again, there's some actions there that officers can take if they feel that it's necessary. And then again, really important for us, the child to officer relationship, or the child to authority relationship. Again, what does that look like? Are they being over familiar? You know, are they seeking your affection? Again, find the child beneath that behaviour. And then the final step is environment, which again I think is just so massive when it comes to neglect. And I've been into so many houses that are just in such a neglectful state, and it's not just about that physical environment, is it? It's about all the other things that we've talked about. But at the moment, I think, especially with cost of living and the jobs that I'm seeing come in recently, it's massively, the environment is massive, it has a massive impact. So we have got loads of information on here, but the home condition, we're saying to officers, they've got to review and document all of this stuff. So they've got to tell us if there's doors and window locks, is there exposed wiring, faulty electrical appliances, is there sufficient working lighting in areas that may pose a risk? Are there cluttered stairs? Are there baby gates? Mould and damp, such a big one now in so many houses, and how that impacts a child's health. Bathroom, you know, is there adequate facilities to wash and bath? Is there running water? We talk about kids having toothbrushes, you know, toilets, bedrooms, living rooms. We are literally giving officers a list there of what I would expect them to tick off and say that actually every child has the right to that. Basic needs, you know, we say that every child has a right to feel secure, safe and warm and nourished. So I want them again to tell me, is there sufficient food? We need to make sure we're going into cupboards, we're having a look that there's enough food. Running water, appropriate clothing, toothbrushes, adequate beds, appropriate bedding, education, you know, access to appropriate medical care. I think for me, there was a little boy that died in December, and his home address was in such a neglectful state, and he was so neglected. I do this naturally anyway, because I've been doing it for such a long time, but I would expect he didn't have, there wasn't sufficient food, he didn't have appropriate clothing, he didn't have a toothbrush and his teeth were absolutely black. There wasn't appropriate bed, you know, he was sleeping on a toddler bed, he was 5 years old, there was no clean bedding, it was a dirty, soiled mattress. It's all of those things that if somebody had gone in a couple of weeks before or a month before, I'd hope that they're the kind of things that they'd pick up on. There's some stuff here on substance misuse. So we're talking to officers about, you know, if they go into a house and there's concerns that parents or carers are under the influence of alcohol or drugs, kind of things that they need to look out for, making note of any evidence of substance misuse in the home or within the vicinity of the child. Obviously reminding them that the children not being present doesn't actually eliminate the risk. And then here there's some action. So are the parents able to supervise the child or children appropriately here and now? Yes, okay. Where a child's believed to be at risk of significant harm through carers or parents. Ooh, don't want that to happen. I thought it was charging, sorry, I'll be quick. Place the children into police protection. It's quite simple, the actions that we put on there. You know, if you think a child at risk of significant harm, please protect them. If you don't, let's look at all the other things that we can do.
So it's not necessarily about you've got that child in front of you right here and now, but you know a child does belong in this environment, but they're just not here at this occasion. We still expect officers to locate that child and make sure that they are safeguarded.
So I think, and again, another one for us, internal door. Well, it was internal door locks, wasn't it? So I think me and Lucy put this on for two reasons. I think the first one was about children falling out of windows constantly. We always have those jobs where a child fell out of a first floor window because the locks are legal or there is no lock on the window. But then secondly, and a real big one, was locks on fridges and locks on cupboard doors. Again, saying to officers, you know, that a child should have the right to go into a cupboard and retrieve food if they want to. If there's any locks on cupboard doors or fridges, again, a real red flag. And it's saying be professionally curious, go into the cupboards, go searching, be nosy. You know, if there's safeguarding concerns, we've got every right to do it. We talk a little bit about the external home environment and just reminding officers to be professionally curious all the time. Ask the questions to gain a deeper understanding of any risks. And there was just some final words there, and it's just reminding that, you know, abuse isn't just physical or sexual, it is around emotional abuse and it is around neglect, and it's only by capturing all that stuff that we're going to understand exactly that child's voice and lived experience. So that's our app. So let me just try and get that the PowerPoint back on.
So this is an app that we own, that we can add to, that we can evolve, we can make better, we can take things out. From all the presentations we've done on this, we've had some really good feedback about things that we could add in, things from your own local partnerships that would be really relevant, that would go in this app. So sort of underneath that app there, you've got you've got the space for us to be able to add stuff in. So we've talked about police protection, we've talked around guidance around police protection, we've talked about home alone and abandonments, which often are tricky to navigate your way through. So there's a lot of scope here for us to develop this app. But interestingly, Carla went to do a focus group last week with some young people in Birmingham, under 18-year-olds I think they were. Yeah. And she went through this app and she sort of said, what do you think as young people, what do you think? And there was lots of children there from all sort of experiences that weren't there, sort of people that had been exposed to trauma. So some of our experts by experience really. And they said, do you know what? If I'd known that I was entitled to this as a child, this would have really made me question where I was at. Yeah. And it was really quite interesting. We talked about it this morning, didn't we? Just to say, from an education perspective, is this an app that maybe we need to develop into that world to sort of start talking around what should children understand as what their basic needs are, because maybe they aren't experiencing them. We think there's going to be some great benefits, don't we, to extending this app out into a multi-agency app and adopt it. You know, we're not saying it's brilliant, you know, but it's something that's available. We can develop it, and to my knowledge, we haven't really got something that is sort of multi-use at the moment that can be, I mean, it's already embedded in West Midlands Police, which is a huge, you know, volume of safeguarders. So it's a good start to start thinking about how can we go further.
But it links into all of us, doesn't it? Every single one of us in the room, it will link into. So
we've talked around health massively, like we think paramedics, ambulance, have seen some in the room, you know. Imagine if you had the access to that app and you could use that as a touch point to sort of say, well, there's a couple of things here that I would really think would meet the AWARE principles and need to be referred in.
It's that red flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
Red flags.
Yeah. But anyway, so we've started to deliver it across the region really, and we've had some really good feedback. We specifically looked at it in Warsaw in post JTI, and we've had some really good feedback that actually some of the referrals that are coming through are of much better quality, and that's what we want to achieve really here. Of course, we want that immediate safeguarding and that hidden vulnerability identified, but we also want it to have some meaningful purpose beyond that. We want it to inform that secondary investigation and practitioners to be able to take things from a long-term perspective, you know, and if you've got a really good informed picture right at the very beginning, it does assist us as we move on. So we have developed West Midlands Police systems to incorporate the AWARE principles. So our Connect system now, which is our IT system, which records all our crimes and all of our rationale and decision making, now completely reflects the AWARE principles. So when officers crime something, or they put a referral in and say this child is at risk, they have to work through the AWARE set. So they have to acknowledge appearance, they have to do that. They have to put in, what did I find about this child's appearance? Not just one of the children in the address, but all of the children. So we are making sure that there is a really clear framework in place to ensure that this is captured. And in fairness, this wasn't the case 6 months ago. You know, it was really down to officers' discretion as to whether or not they put anything at all. And that's why we knew it needed to change. We knew there needed to be some really clear guidance for officers to complete this. Anything else?
Sorry, Lucy, is that done at the time of responding to a call?
Yeah, so any physical attendance and action that's taken, what officers will do is they will then go onto the IT system and they will record either a crime or a referral. Whereas it was like a free narrative before, they could write what they wanted really, you know, and say what their observations were. We've actually put some framework to that observations now. We're saying you have to address that child's appearance.
Whilst they're at the call?
Not necessarily at the call, because it depends on what mobility device they've got and whether they've got laptops, etc. Not all of them have got laptops. I'm going to look at yourself and say, I bet you haven't got a laptop, have you? No.
Yeah.
So not everybody has that immediacy. But that's the same for every officer really. But yeah, it's the first thing that they will do when they go back to the station. They will have it all on their body worn, so they'll have it recorded, everything that they've physically seen and heard, and they will have their app, and then they will obviously record everything onto their Connect system. And that in turn should then come through as referrals to children's services, to health, etc. And what we're hoping for is a much more informed picture of what that officer has then seen, as opposed to a generic snapshot of house was a bit dirty, kids seemed fine. You know, and we know that's what happens, we know, you know, I'm not going to stand here and say that doesn't happen. That's what we're trying to weed out. We're trying to really professionalise the approach to safeguarding and vulnerability.
But I was just going to say, they have access then and there to that. So they know that they've got to capture all the information, and they know that they've got to answer all these questions. So even though they can't physically write it down, they've got that in front of them. So that they've got to capture it then and there whilst they're there. Otherwise, they won't be able to record it properly later.
And I would expect that to all be captured on your body worn video, because it's the most simple way to record everything. You're walking into the bathroom, right? What have we got? Have we got toothbrushes for everybody? You know, I would walk through, I'd do that physical walkthrough, and then I'd have those conversations with parents, with family members. It's all captured then, in order to then transfer.
I think our next slide was just a little bit around our new operating model.
Yeah. Just to say, for those that aren't aware, that we very recently have gone through a restructure that won't necessarily have a huge impact, certainly from a public protection perspective. So Clara and I work on public protection. We've stayed as a centralised function, still remaining to work in the local areas, but actually you now have a greater police footprint and resilience in each of the local policing areas, as on the screen there. So from a Walsall perspective, your local policing area is owned for all, you know, what am I trying to say, like your local response belongs to Walsall, whereas before it used to be a forced response. So you now have local policing responding to Walsall and Walsall alone, your neighbourhood or Walsall alone, you know, any other sort of policing capacity. I'm trying to think of what else you would.
Yeah, so if you think of you like burglaries and robberies, that's not centralised anymore. They focus on their own areas. So you've got people in Walsall that are dealing with burglaries and robberies in Walsall. It doesn't impact us. It hasn't impacted us really, but it's just for you to be aware that it's more.
But in terms of aware, as in aware principles, what I would really like to see then is that homegrown Walsall, you know, ownership. You know, so you're going to have your same officers on your response, on your your neighbourhood.
Yeah.
You know, so the relationship building from a localised perspective should be a lot stronger.
Yes.
That's where we're hoping to go with that. So that went live on the 1st of April.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. Really.
That's it. So I suppose do you want us to see if there's any questions now, or do you want to do your bit and then?
Yeah, that's okay, because we might not have time, so we might have to hold them and we can do it in the Q&A.
Thank you for listening. I know it's quite a lot of information, and I'm hoping that it is something that everybody is encouraged to use. And please challenge your police colleagues if you are dealing with child protection issues. Please, you know, I'd encourage you to do that, because it is so important that this is embedded, and you know, we do need to do it. So.
Okay, one of the things I just want to pick up on there is how you said about it going over to people like West Midlands Ambulance Services. We've, as a partnership, have already been approached because we do get inappropriate referrals coming through from, we've been kind of going over sort of blue light services. We're putting together a blue light voiceover PowerPoint that's going to be on intranet sites for ambulance service, West Midlands Fire Service, police, and we've actually collaborated with Lucy and Clara and actually said, you know, can we use the basics of what's in the Aware app, so we've got that absolute consistent message. So that's something that's we're doing at the moment and working towards. It will be an interim, but what we are hoping to do is to get something like the app potentially across a partnership, which will really help us. It will be a tool in your toolbox that you'll be able to use then. We've spoken a lot this morning about graded care profiles, so I just wanted to use this opportunity to just kind of go over a little bit of what that is if you're not aware. First, I'm just going to ask us, before today, just show of hands of who'd actually heard of the graded care profile prior. How many have been trained in it? And how many have actually been part of either helping to support the graded care profile or have led in it? Okay, lovely. So we need to really make the graded care profile a more usable document within Walsall. We've probably had it in Walsall now for about, I want to say about 7 or 8 years. It's been here for a long time since we did the initial training. But people are accessing the training, but they're not using it. And then there's a period of time where they haven't used it, so then they don't feel confident enough to use it. So we've got to do quite a lot of work around graded care profile. We need to make sure that people who haven't been trained are trained. We need to make sure we're training the right people, so the people who are going to lead or input into graded care profiles. And we need to do some refresher training with people who have currently had the training but haven't really used it, so have lost, you know, forgotten what it's about really. So it is an evidence-based assessment tool. It's on a score system, so 1 is best and 5 is worse, and it captures the level of physical and emotional care. So once we've identified that neglect is in that family home, this is when we would do this assessment with families, and we would go in and we would have the consent to do it with them. This is not a doing to, this is something that we want to work with families in order to understand what some of the strengths are within their home. So what do parents do really well, and how can they transfer some of those skills into things that they might not be doing so well? It's identifying the strengths. It's not just looking at the negatives, and we do not want it to be about the negatives at all. It targets the aspects of neglectful care and provides evidence that can inform care and intervention plans if it's needed. It's around sort of, it helps decision making. It helps us to understand what level of threshold that family needs to be at. It's about helping parents to understand their capacity, so what their parenting styles are, and it helps them to give them the ability to make those changes, but more importantly to sustain those changes as well. And it brings what life is like to the child to the forefront, which is what this is all about, you know, that fourth partner and bringing them into the middle of absolutely everything we do. So this is just some of the sub-areas that we look at. So it's very similar, so it will cover a lot of the same areas, and actually what would be really good is that actually if we've already got the Aware app and police and people are using it, a lot of the information can be used together to collaboratively bring the graded care profile and to do the assessment as well. So it looks at development around engagement, physical and safety. Okay, so the purpose, it's to get that baseline measurement. Where is that family? Where is that child sitting within the family at the moment? Where are the parents? Where are we at, and where do we need to get to make life better for that child or young person? It helps us to make sure that the right interventions are put in place at the right time, and it helps us to monitor progress as well. So we have seen a lot of people saying that they're completing graded care profile because they want to get it up to a level 4 intervention, so they're completing it as an evidence-based tool to show that it meets that threshold. We want to be using this at the earliest possible. When we are identifying neglect within that family, we need to be using the graded care profile. So it can be there to support those early help, identify the needs and the areas of strength. It can support social work practice. We need to be working with the IROs, the independent reviewing officers, as part of child protection, to make sure that every child that comes through the system or we're working with, that actually have, under the category of neglect, there is a graded care profile in place, because we'll be able to monitor the progress that way. Hopefully you're all familiar with this. This is our continuum of need. So we've got universal to level 4. We need to be using the graded care profile at this point here so that it doesn't escalate to here when we're looking at neglect. If we start using it here, we're using it a little bit too late. So if we're identifying that there's neglect within the family home, it is something that we can use. Now, it is quite a lengthy document, and one of the things we are looking at is whether or not we can bring together another tool to help when they are really low level. Have we got something else that's not as lengthy potentially that can support in identifying neglecting families? But this tool is really about helping parents to understand and supporting parents through that process of their parenting and how they can make changes to make sure that the children aren't being neglected.